am joined today by the one and only Tori Dawson, aka Yamabushi, aka the Invisible Sensei. Did I get any other names that you go by? So let me ask you: should I sport the gray shirt, your favorite gray shirt, or should this only be the Del Hamby Sensei shirt?
No, you don't know.
So for the viewers and listeners, I just have to say that I don't know. This shirt's actually very comfortable.
Yeah,
especially here in Okinawa, right? It breathes really well.
Yeah, man, of course.
I don't know what's up with this 1970s collar, but I kind of like it. But
you wear the shit out of it. What you've got to do also, you've got to get a little bit of tape in the middle, and you've got to get a pocket
protector.
Pocket protector. You know what, bro? I wear glasses too. I just haven't had the opportunity to get any. I wear glasses myself, but I just
don't try to make me feel better. It's not going to work. I mean,
some people can really make it look good.
Just so everybody watching this and listening understands, I wore this gray shirt, this very fashionable gray shirt, probably 2 years ago when I interviewed Del Hamby Sensei. And the only person to call me out for looking like a nerd in it was you. Thank you for tuning into the Okinawa Karate Podcast. I am Josh Simmers, coming to you from the birthplace of karate, Okinawa, Japan. I am joined today by the one and only Tuari Dawson, a.k.a. Yamabushi, a.k.a. the Invisible Sensei. Did I get any other names that you go by?
Oh, well, none there was a whole cartel thing, but I don't like to put that out there because...
I'm wondering, how many names do you need?
Well, man, the thing is the hitmen, they just keep coming. They just keep coming. So I'm just trying to make sure the trail is nice and cool. Hey, bro, thank you so much for having me. This is actually quite surreal because I literally have been such a fan of the podcast since it started. And it's really cool to be on it. I never thought in 1,000 years I would, but
keep going.
Awesome,
more.
Awesome.
Yep.
Awesome. And can I just say that shade of grey on you? Oh my gosh, that just brings out your, some people might say your ears are too far apart and your eyes are too close together, but not me. Maybe Michael Hagen Sensei, maybe that he might have said something like that to me, but I don't agree. You look amazing.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Hey, speaking of Michael, have you ever seen him doing kata? Has he sent you any videos or pictures where he's doing his kata and he's going pretty hard and he's got that lock of hair that starts to float down, like the Clark Kent? I've got some pictures I'll send you where the lock of hair. I have pictures where he's like punching, right? The lock of hair is perfectly lined up with his knuckles, and I'm pretty sure it's like that on purpose. I'll send you some pictures. Maybe I'll post them online for everybody to see. But I don't know. I don't want to upset Michael too much. I'm going to get some pointers from him on kata.
I think the thing is about, like obviously I'm not an expert on locks of hair, but I think that's where the magic is. That's why Apex Karate is what it is. It's all on the lock of hair and the amount of product that he puts in.
Listen, we're early in the podcast. Okay, yeah. I haven't got to the questions yet, but I have questions I want to ask you that were sent in by some friends of yours. So since you're talking about the hair, a gentleman that Mr. Jeff McDonald.
Oh, yes.
And also Mr. Michael Hagen would both like to know your beauty secrets. Jeff wants to know specifically your beautician or your barber. And then Michael, let's see, Jeff McDonald said, who's your hairstylist? And Michael said, ask him how he manages those flowing locks. What hair product does he recommend?
Well,
so okay. Mr. Michael Hagen, Mr. Jeff McDonald, this is for you.
Okay, so number one, Michael, Jeff, I know you're both two incredible martial artists, but don't hate me because I'm beautiful, okay? Hate is so unattractive on Sensei. We're trying to set examples. My head is my stylist. His last name is Sander, first name Belt, and my product of choice is turtle wax. And when you do it, and I go, just, you know, you're getting that shine and that sheen. So thank you both, and I will get you for asking that question.
I like that question. Very good question from Mr. McDonald and Mr. Hagen. Thank you for asking that. I wanted to ask that question, but I was a little bit afraid to, so you guys got it out. All right, so we've been having some fun here, obviously, in the beginning. Listen, folks, Tuari and I have been talking about doing this for a while, and as you know, or as most people know, I have not interviewed anybody that I haven't trained with or met in person. Usually I like to do both, just because it gives me a little bit of a better idea of who the person is, some different questions to ask, you know, a little more of a personable approach. So you actually conducted a Bunkai Jam session about a month ago, right? And that became our first official training session together. And I said, you know what, it's time to get this guy on the podcast. We've been cutting up and having fun and busting on each other for 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 months now. I don't even remember how long, but talk, you know, once a week or every other week or something like that, having a good time. So I was a little bit worried about doing this. Is this going to be a podcast where we just laugh and goof off the whole time, or is it going to be something where we actually talk about karate? And I'm not sure yet how that's going to go, but we're going to try to keep it somewhat of a normal flow here. So I'm going to open it up and, you know, just ask you for your quick intro. You don't have to go through 40 plus years of explanation, but I do have some specific questions that I was asked to ask you that I want to get into a little bit later about your various martial arts, specifically with your indigenous arts. But I want to hear it from you, man. What's this Tuari Dawson man all about? And the floor is yours. Tell us how you got started. What keeps you ticking? Anything you want to tell us?
Sure. Well, I'd like to start by thanking the members of the Academy. No, but seriously. So my name is Tuari Dawson. I live in a little place called Wainuiomata in Wellington, New Zealand. Pardon me. I'm an Okinawan Goju practitioner, Jiu-Jitsu practitioner, Nihon Jiu-Jitsu as opposed to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, although complete respect for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Kobudo practitioner. Although I did have a lesson today that reminded me of my many, many Kobudo shortcomings. I practice Silat for a number of years, and I do stress practice. I've done combatives, military combatives, and a range of different things. I started off in Kyokushinkai Karate and Nakajima Judo as a child, and just kind of continued. And of course, I have a background from a very early age in our traditional indigenous fighting tradition. So yeah, that's kind of me. I have a small dojo here in Wainuiomata, and yeah, if you're ever down this way, guys, just hit the Okinawan Karate podcast up. The only podcast coming to you directly from the birthplace of karate. And I'm sure Josh will give you my details.
Absolutely. I'll do my best. All right. So I want to jump into your background in your native martial arts, if we can, because this was one of the questions that came in from a friend of ours, Nick. You know Nick, one of Pat Sensei's friends and students as well. I think you may have even trained with him online. And Nick had asked me to ask you about this. It was also one of the questions I told you I wanted to explore a little bit and get more of a background of your native arts there on New Zealand, how you got started in them. Were you forced into them, being born, you know, into it, so to speak? Is it something that you resisted at first? You wanted to jump into it? Just, I'm really curious to learn more about your native background before we get into the actual Okinawa karate side.
Sure. I suppose so. Here, the name that existed before New Zealand is actually Aotearoa, and Aotearoa means the land of the long white cloud. And when our forebears came here, they named it because they could see the long white cloud over the landmass, so they knew that their navigational skills had been on the money. And so Maori people So I'm Maori. I'm also Samoan as well, from Samoa. And Cook Island Māori, which is a long list of different things. And I have Irish and Scottish ancestry as well, which I'm very proud of also. The Indigenous traditions here really are about, there are many hundreds of different tribal groups. I come from a tribe in the far north of our country called Te Tai Tokiro and Te Tai Tonga, which is in the deep south of our country. So we have most Māori people these days have a kind of a pan-tribal, through intermarriage and so on, a background. The martial arts, depending on where you come from, most iwi, which is the word we use for tribe, which also means bones. So our bones, our tribes, our iwi, are usually known for a specific set of skills in the martial tradition. There's a number of different weapons, but we don't have any steel weapons. So our weapons are predominantly bone, stone, greenstone or jade. We have various spears, long clubs, short clubs, and hand weapons, short infighting hand weapons called patu. And really what it was a way of, I guess, keeping warrior traditions alive. And during the Second World War, we had what the Māori battalion went, and what they were famous for is there's a particular weapon called a taiaha, which is a very long club. And they employed those skills all over the world in the Second World War. When they were going onto the battlefield and their weapons, and they would run out of ammunition, they would flip the rifles up and use their weapons in the manner of the long club. Really today, what it's about is preserving. There's many different cultural arts, but it's really about keeping the stories, our language, our culture, and because we're a culture that has no written tradition, or hasn't until the last century. So all our stuff comes to us in stories and as a verbal tradition. And I think for me, what happens is that I guess I grew up and I just was always gravitated towards it. We have storytelling and performing arts, all those traditional things as well, traditional healing arts. But for me, I don't know, I always enjoyed, there's something I always really enjoyed about it. And from an early age, we learn how to do different elements of that, I want to say. So you would have seen for people who may know what a poi is, in Aotearoa is a little ball on the end of a string which we swing, which is about creating manual dexterity for short weapons, for infighting weapons. So it was incorporated into children's games, and I, like many other people, grew into it and grew up with it and really enjoyed it. But it was also about understanding our culture and keeping those things alive, to giving us a sense of ownership and identity. God, that's a really long explanation, brother. Sorry.
No, I appreciate that. But Tori, who taught you this? Was it your family, or is this something that's taught within the community? Like the culture just starts teaching the young children this? Is it in the grade schools?
Well, it's kind of for me, who started teaching me was an uncle of mine. Started teaching me, but then later on, here we call them tohunga. In Hawaiian culture, you call them in Samoan culture, you call them tufunga, and it means like it's very similar to, I guess, a sensei. We have people who specialize in the different things in the healing arts and the martial arts and the performing arts and storytelling and all these things. But I started training with my uncle, and then later on I started training with one of the premier teachers of our martial arts in the last 60 years, a guy called Mita Mohi. And Mita Mohi passed away some years ago, but he would take young children like myself. He would take men who were in who were serving prison terms because of a loss of identity and all these sort of things. We would we go to this place called Makoia, Te Motu Tapu Atiniro, and we'd train like a gashuku, a week-long gashuku, where we'd meet people from all different varying backgrounds. We'd meet movie stars, we'd meet broadcasters, we'd meet radio, TV personalities, we'd meet people who had just come out of prison, lifers in prison, we'd meet athletes and fighters and right across the board. And what we had in common was that we were all Māori. And it was an opportunity, I guess, for us to really see what we were capable of. And Mita always said to us, when you learn these things, they'll take you around the world. And it's certainly true in my case and many others.
Can someone that's not native participate and learn the art, or is it very much closed in?
For me, I grew up, to be honest, believing that if you weren't Māori, you shouldn't learn them. But I believe, for me, I believe that if people have an open and honest and open mind and an open heart, and they're wanting to understand things fully and do it with respect, then I have no problem with it. I guess I can't complain of people not understanding my culture when I rebuke them for making an honest attempt to understand it and experience it. And I think that, coming up, training with Mita and then moving on later to train with other teachers, they were very open and very welcoming to people irrespective of their ethnicity. But I mean, it's always a respect thing,
Yes, sure. And is there, if we do kind of connect it to other martial arts, I guess, specifically Okinawa style, right? Is there kata that you learn? Is there forms that you learn when you're practicing with weapons? And also, is there anything that does not include weapons? Is there an empty hand side of this as well?
There is a number of different weapons. There not so much kata, if you think of it as kihon. So not kata in the sense of like if you're doing kobudo, like doing learning long sequences of movements. You're learning movements in specific. How would I put it? You're learning movement, but also you're learning the story that goes with that movement. So, as an example, a lot of our fighting styles emulate elements in the natural world. So there's a movement called tangaroa. Now, tangaroa is the god of the sea, and it's a very circular movement which emulates waves. Ruamoko was the god of earthquakes, so it's a very strongly based style. So not kata as such, but certainly techniques, but also the rationale and the spirit of the different, I guess, style that you're practicing. And again, it's dependent upon who's teaching. I mean, like I've said before, I'm not an expert in the Māori world. I'm expert on my own experience. And it's a really pleasing thing to see our young people gravitate towards those sort of things and to use them as tools for self-development, which is really what they were about. I guess, and for me, that's the connection to what I like about Okinawan karate, is that, I guess, to me, what occurs to me that it's really about developing the practitioner, as opposed to learning a group of fighting skills. There's so much more to it, and I think that's one thing that I really enjoy about Okinawan martial arts, is that there seems to be a real emphasis on the development of the person as opposed to creating invincible fighters.
Right. Yeah, there is. I think if you have the right approach to it, there definitely is, and the right instructor. Yeah. I still want to learn more about this, and I want to see it.
Okay. Can I?
Yeah.
Can I just for a sec? Can you give me a sec? You'll have to edit this. I'm just going to run away and grab a weapon and bring it back, and then I want to.
Yeah.
I'll be right back.
Sure.
Okay. So So as an example, I'll just hold this up so you can see. So this is a long club. So this is called a taiaha. Okay. So all of our weapons have stories which go with them, but they also have names. So we name in order to respect the weapon, we give them names, because we believe when you make something and you own something, that there's an element of yourself that kind of enters that weapon, sort of a life force, if you will. So as an example, so let me just knock everything out. So this is called a taiaha. So you can see the eyes. Okay, let me hold it up this way. So you can see the eyes. Okay, so just as an example, the shape of this weapon, very much like an iku in a sense, very reminiscent of an iku, is reminiscent and in memory of a great weapon maker. The great weapon maker's name was Te Ruru Tangiako. So Te Ruru Tangiako was asked to make a weapon, and he looked around the natural world for inspiration. And what he found is he looked at his son, Akirotangi. Now, Akirotangi was a warrior that was said you couldn't sneak up on him. So because Akirotangi was said to be so aware, it was almost like he had two heads. So he could see in every direction, hear in every direction, and hence why the weapon is double-sided. And that's really a metaphor for, I mean, what we'd call zanchin. You know, it's really about zanchin and awareness, and there's a lesson there, you know. So not only were you learning fighting techniques, but you were learning about genealogy, you're learning old stories, but there was always a metaphor to how we lived, how we trained, and what was really important. What was really important was not how well we fought. What was really important was how well we provided for our families and for our community.
That's really interesting because you know that the Okinawan arts are similar to that too, right? With the dance that was infused into it and telling a story. And then even like my daughters, they do hula at a very traditional, somewhat secretive, if you will, hula studio. I mean, you're not even allowed to take videos, right? As parents, even we're not allowed to take videos of any of the dances, and all the stories that are being told into it. It really fascinates me, and I appreciate you sharing that. I want to, if we can we. I don't want to jump too far ahead, but I'm
No
curious
worries.
about the parallels to your training, specifically with weapons, right? With now, if you take this to the Okinawa side of Kabuto, similarities and differences. Can
Okay.
you describe some of those for me?
Right. Well, I suppose for me, that if I'm being honest, I think there's always a physical difference. There's only so many ways you can swing a stick or a staff or a club or a this and a that. So there's obvious physical similarities. Someone said to me a while ago, you know, was talking to me, and they did karate and they studied some of the indigenous arts with me as well, and said, oh, you know, Tuari, you're in a really good position to combine both those things. And I kind of think that if you spend time, some things were not supposed to be combined. I think that if you combine certain things, it diminishes both. And for me, I think that the Okinawan martial arts have a rich tradition that goes back, it has its own history, tradition, has its own values and its own stories. And I think that for me, I guess, I know for our Indigenous arts, for my Indigenous study, that I wouldn't presume to impinge upon that by trying to combine. But there are certainly there are parallels. And I think the biggest parallel that sticks out to me is the relationship between a teacher and a student and a student and other students. So the kohai senpai relationship is very reminiscent of a relationship we hear called the tuakana taina. So tuakana is the older, and taina is the younger. But the relationship from people that I've met through Okinawan karate and Okinawan martial arts, the senpai kohai relationship is certainly one of respect and one of finding ways to support each other in their travel. It's not sort of this idea that you have to be subservient, one has to be subservient to the other and all those sort of things. It's really about creating win-win situations where you're actually nurturing the other person's ability. And I think also too the Gojuru, the idea of ruha. We have what we have whānau. Whānau means family. So when you're learning, depending on who you are and where you're from, you are learning a family style. But the most important element of that is the preservation of family, not a preservation of a secret, but the idea that the most important thing you can do is give back to community. We're a collective, family-orientated, tribal-orientated community. So it's always what goes back into the collective.
Yep, that's very, very true. Very true. I mean, people talk about it even with rank structure a little bit in Okinawa, or maybe not even only Okinawa arts, but in other arts, the first so many years you're taking it in, and then after you need to start giving it back, and maybe up to a certain dan level you're taking it in, and then now it's time for you to turn around and then give it back and teach it, right? Do you teach your native arts? Are you an instructor as well? Did you have to reach a certain rank or protocol or something to be able to teach that?
Yes. So it depends, because as I say, there's many hundreds, there's many thousands of practitioners, wonderful men and women who practice. And I wouldn't presume to be, I'm not any kind of master, but I am an instructor, if that's the word that you want to use. For me, one of the things that's kind of happened just sort of on that issue, over the last probably 20 years, they've started to bring in rank. We never had ranks. And we assign traditional names to these ranks. And I think what it's become, for some people, in some ways it's been good, because for certain, depending on who you train with, because it's very organized. It organizes the system, it's very systemized it. But in some senses, it's been really negative, because people are constantly trying to step over each other for rank. What used to be the rank, the sign that you could do it, was that you would be you could actually do it and make it work. So I came up through that before there was rank, and then there was rank, and I was lucky enough to become in the wānanga, or the school that I was doing, the whare were called an ahorai. An ahorai is I guess, sensei. But I'm certainly no master, and I've trained with a number of different people, relatives, different tribal groups that I'm related to through kinship. You were talking before about your daughter's doing hula at a halau. I lived in Hawaii for a number of years and was very lucky to be able to have some experience, albeit as a complete visitor, of some of the Hawaiian martial arts. They have an incredible style or styles of lua, which is very closely aligned to hula, the study of hula. And I wouldn't presume to speak about that with any sense of being an authority on it. But wherever you go, there are indigenous styles. In England, there's the long bow, and there's the sword, and the short sword, and the quarterstaff, and all those sort of things. In the States, I'm sure there's indigenous. Where do we get boxing from? I'm a huge fan of boxing. All those arts, they came from somewhere. Wrestling, all of those sort of things were taken from somewhere and created and improved upon and made to where they are today. So I think we all have a tradition. It's a question of whether or not you take time to really appreciate and look for it.
It's good that you are I commend you for going out of your way to learn it, though, and then for the people that have taught it to you, and that you're continuing to go in that direction and then share it. I'm happy to see that, especially living here in Okinawa, and seeing that the youth here tend to do the same thing. The traditional dance, the Asa dance, is taught in the local schools. When my daughters were in the Japanese school, my youngest wasn't in the Japanese school long enough to have to do this, but my oldest was there when they, I think she was in 5th grade or 6th grade, when it was mandatory that they participated in the village Asa festival. And it was small, but they had to. They go around during Obon and they march through the streets out here and play the music and do the dance. And I was really happy to see her. As a matter of fact, I was coming home from a business trip, and I remember my wife and my youngest daughter picked me up at the airport, and we hightailed it back up here just so we didn't miss seeing them walking through the village. And we caught probably the last 20 or so minutes of it. I was just so happy to see my daughter experiencing that. And so I'm glad they do that, and in a sense, I'm glad they make some of these things mandatory, or they really encourage the children to get out there and do it, and they encourage the locals to keep teaching it. Every day at this community center right next to my house where I used to teach karate at night, there's one day a week where the local elderly ladies get together and practice their traditional dance, and I got in trouble one day with my wife because I said to her, I don't know if it's true that there's an age requirement, but I said, honey, you should probably maybe consider joining something like that and learning. And I was quickly reminded that she is not of that age yet, because probably most of those ladies in there are 60 and above. Actually, a lot of them are probably in their 80s. I was like, oh yeah, I guess you're not ready for that.
Wow.
But that it wasn't what I meant, man.
If you're going to put your foot down your throat, I mean, that's the way to do it.
If you're going to do it well, right? Like Sensei Jason Perry tells me all the time, if you're going to butcher the Okinawa language, just butcher it consistently. And I do.
Well, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
So for you as an American, having done practice karate firstly in the States and then coming to Okinawa and having an Okinawan family living in Okinawa, how has your experience been in terms of going from training in the States to training in Okinawa? I mean, what are your thoughts on the values of Okinawan karate?
So, okay, the difference is drastic. As far as the